Jonathan Greene is a lifelong real estate investor, concierge agent, and a certified life coach and real estate coach. He is a former attorney, gallerist, museum curator, and educator who left standardized employment to pursue his lifelong obsession with real estate investing full-time quite some time ago, at least 10 years ago. Jonathan has a wealth of information. He's been investing since before he knew he was investing. This conversation is a ton of fun. Jonathan also has a podcast called Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, which you should definitely listen to. And this is really fun, so have a good time.
Be the change you want to see. Make a difference by giving your money a purpose, a mission to do good. Welcome to Money with Mission, where we show you how to create passive income so that you have options for how to work and how to live your life while leaving a legacy of positive social impact.
Welcome back to Money with Mission. Today I have Jonathan Greene. Jonathan has been a lot of things in his life, and we're going to get into all of that. You heard the introduction. He has a lot of professions under his belt. And let's see how he got through all of those or is still doing those and is now real estate investing and teaching and coaching. And, life gives us what life gives us. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Yeah, Felicia, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure to have you on my podcast. So I'm very happy to be here with you on Money with Mission.
Let's put that out there right now. Jonathan has a podcast, Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, which I kind of am jealous about the name, but we'll go ahead and let him keep that.
I mean, it's in the process of trademark, so I'm way ahead of the curve.
You gotta get that one done. Exactly. So, Jonathan, talk about your money story. Were you born the way you are now and not seeing scarcity? Were you born into this family of How did you develop to your money story now?
Yeah, it's always a good place to start. I was definitely fortunate growing up, but I think that people misinterpret it as if I did grow up with a quote trust fund, and that happened because my dad came from nothing and he created it. So my dad was great with money. He taught me everything I knew and then forgot and then had to relearn again about money. So, but I grew up with my mom. My mom was a single mom. My parents got divorced when I was like 2-ish. So I grew up in apartments, with my mom. I lived in Brooklyn Heights, very nice area, but we didn't live in the most swank apartments. And on the weekends, I would go to my dad's, and we definitely played around with real estate from the time I was little. So I know I'm fortunate and I appreciate that, but I also wasn't someone who squandered it because my dad wasn't a showy type of person. So I don't think anybody really realized that we had money or that I had money unless they came to something that looked like it was expensive, like a house or something.
Okay. What was your thought about money? And you can compare even the way you might have thought about money with your mom and the way you thought about money with your dad, or were they different, the same? How did that go for you?
I think they were really the same. My parents, they were different types of people, but the parts around caring for a child were the same. So their teachings were the same. My mom was a hippie and my dad was a non-disciplinarian. So I never had any rules. I was given a lot of opportunities. And I think that helped me understand money more. My dad gave me my own credit card when I was very young, quote, for emergencies only, which I thought meant buy Air Jordans at Foot Locker when I was 14. But I mean,
it's an emergency.
Yeah, I felt like it was an emergency and they were new and I really wanted them. But I think, growing up with a single mom and then with a stepdad who was in the house for a while, I didn't want for things because, I got most of the things that I wanted, but I also was not someone with everything. I just didn't really think about it. And I think where I grew up at the time, a lot of my friends and I were all the same way. I was a latchkey kid. So my mom worked and I walked to and from school from the time I was in first grade in Brooklyn. That's just what we did. We all really had the keys around our neck. I would go, buy stuff on the way home, get candy. I would load myself up. So I did always have money in my pocket. So I don't think I really ever thought of it, but I would definitely, had friends along the way who, were less fortunate, more fortunate. So I was a participant in an understanding of kind of the sociality of money, but I don't think I really dug in too deep until I got older to understand.
Okay. So you learned real estate investing from your dad?
Yeah, 100% everything that I know. Well, I've learned stuff since then, but my dad was an attorney, as am I. and he made all his money in real estate. And he was just somebody who would go to foreclosures, buy random things, a couple that I still own. He was just way, way ahead of his time. He would make offers at yard sales. He would look at foreclosures. He would buy things that have scalable value. He would buy random, strip malls in Florida. He just bought stuff for a good deal. He was a deal hunter and he really, really liked it. And he took me along with him every weekend, everywhere.
So, I talk about building a team and doing all those things. It sounds like he might have just gone and bought something and figured it out how it's going to work later. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, I mean, he knew a lot. Like he was very, very far ahead of his curve in terms of like money usage and how to buy properties and what their long-term use and fixing up properties. I wouldn't call it flipping because he was more of a like putting gum in a hole type of guy.
Okay.
Whereas I'm like, I want to patch the hole and make it perfect. But he was a landlord also. So he taught me all about landlording, had a lot of rental properties growing up that I started to hybrid manage during the summers when I was about 18 to 22 before I went to law school. And that taught me a lot about management, money receipt, like how to get it. Because when I would get home, everybody would be 6 months behind on their rent. And my job was to go get it, and I'm 18. I don't really know how to get it. And I had to try to figure it out.
So what do you mean when you got home? So nobody was collecting rent in between? It's like people they were supposed to be sending it, and if you didn't come get it.
They were paying rent sometimes. My dad was the nicest guy ever. Like there's no one on earth who would say anything bad about my dad. He liked people. He liked to help people. He liked making money too. And you and I talked about that, on my podcast where, it's okay to want the profits and also do good socially. And I think my dad was, not necessarily like a philanthropist like that. He liked to make money, but I think he was very cognizant of like, hey, look, if somebody doesn't pay their rent for a couple months, they're probably struggling. I'll just get it when I get it. It's just I was left to solve the problem because I would come home from college and he'd be like, here you go. Because I worked at his law office during the summer and I just started to figure out those things.
That was one of my hard things with being a landlord was somebody came with a sob story and I would be okay with it. But ultimately it put us behind in collecting our, on our payments and all the things that we had to do with our money. We were spending our own money supporting somebody.
Yeah.
So it was, to me, that's one of the hardest parts about being a landlord is listening to somebody's story. So now I actually have somebody between me and my tenants. I need a manager in between there to know they're supposed to be working for me.
I think that what you just said is one of the biggest scales in my personal success is understanding I need a buffer for a lot of things. Like I have a very distinct personality. Lots of things will bother me if I allow them to. So in real estate investing and some other aspects of business, I need to have somebody in the middle, whether it be property management, project management. On my real estate team now, I have a team success manager. I have to have a buffer because I don't want to deal with the minutia because I'll get annoyed and just like not do it. And somebody needs to do it. So that's helped me a lot as well. My sister and I ended up, inheriting a bunch of the properties from my dad after he passed away. And we learned together, what our scales of management, and we have similar personalities, but she'll always get it done. Yeah. And then when something goes haywire, I'm the one who fixes it. So we figured out those parts.
Those are good. That's good. That's really good. What do you think about, so I have a lot of physician friends who want to be real estate investors and they think about buying it. They're still full-time physicians. They're going to buy properties and they're going to landlord them themselves because they don't want to spend the money to have it managed. They don't want that money coming out. They want it all to come to them. What kind of advice what's your advice on that kind of thing?
I think it depends on the proximity to the property. So like the way that I do it, again, I have a big on-market team and I actually have a lot of doctor clients, investors who are purchasing as landlords. So what I do, because I'm not involved in property management, is I teach them how to self-manage the right way, which is using portals to make sure that the rent's on auto pay, not using Zelle and things that people have control over. You want it to be coming on ACH direct out of their account. So there's nothing really to do. If they're late, it's just going to generate the auto pay. It creates an automated buffer in between. And then I also teach them how to self-manage the property to make the property more accessible so they get less calls, which means fixing things right away, separating laundry on days, making sure that your parking spaces are numbered, just so you're reducing the disputes between tenants, because that's what it's fix-its and disputes that gets all the calls. And I also teach them, again, we handle all of their rentals, coming in. So we're very hard on, we're open to everybody who submits for rentals, but like we're very, very hard on making sure that they understand that they're looking at the National Tenant Network portal and also giving everybody a fair shot. Sometimes what initially seems like a bad application isn't once you get to know more about them.
Yeah. So talk about what you do. You're getting into that a little bit.
A lot.
Feel like, I can invest with him? What does he do?
Yeah. Well, you alluded to it that so I started off as an attorney, as was my dad. I was a prosecutor for 7 years in the state of Florida and then a criminal defense attorney. And my mom passed away when I was 20. My dad passed away when I was 33. And after he passed away, I had no interest in being a lawyer anymore. He was super excited about it. I was good to leave it in the past. So I transitioned from that into the art world. But during this whole time, I was always investing. Like my dad taught me to invest, and I was investing on my own from the time I was 18 on, mostly in single family houses that I lived in and other single family rentals that we did vacation rentals way before Airbnb existed. And then about 10 years ago, after a 3-year stint of teaching, I was like, I think I'm going to get my real estate license. My sister was like,
Time out. Yeah. Attorney, art.
I get bored. I really like challenges. So the teaching was a hybrid off of the art. And then it became something I really enjoyed at the university level. And then I got my real estate license during that time. And my sister was like, why didn't you do this a long time ago? We would have saved all these, realtor fees. And then that scaled up quicker than I thought. In a few years, I was building teams. So I've built 3 separate real estate on-market teams, the last one that I'm still running now. And that's been an interesting thing too, because the real estate market shifts. Real estate agents are very hard to kind of keep going. It's a tough business. So I learned a lot in my business. I definitely had a competitive advantage from everything that I knew from real estate investing my whole life to go into the agent game. And what's interesting is I'm a horrendous salesperson. I'm just really good with people, even though I'm an introvert. So I always looked at real estate, I think because I can, which goes back to what you asked me. I didn't have to have the commissions right away. Like I was okay. I had properties, I had other income. So I didn't have the thing where I like to work. I work like 100 hours a week, but I'm not working to get the check. I'm working to help the clients. And that's what I think helps me be successful. But it's easier for me to say that because I don't have to have the check to pay, a mortgage. Yeah. So I understand where agents are failing, but that's been a team building has been very hard. It's a good scale on money sometimes and not so great on other times.
So I'm going to go back to what you just said about I don't have to have the check. And you get to practice real estate as a realtor or as that agent in a different way than those people coming in and this is how I'm going to feed my family. You're feeding your family off of your investments and the things from your inheritance from your dad, of course, but you were investing on your own since you were 18. And over all that time, you've built up this portfolio that now is feeding you and your family. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, my dad taught me a lot. And I certainly, with parents dying and grandparents dying, I definitely had inheritances along the way. But I've turned a lot of that money into more money by different types of investing, stocks, real estate, freaking out and just holding cash for a long time after 2008 in like a panic mode. So I look at myself as I didn't make all the right decisions with money, but I didn't make terrible decisions. So I never went into a time where I squandered something that my dad worked so hard to create for us. And again, I understand my privilege and appreciation of that. So I can look at somebody who like needs that commission. And when that deal fails in real estate, which can happen all the time, like they have to pay the rent. Like I don't have an answer for that, but that's what you sign up for. So it's a mindset about if we just focus on helping the clients, good things will come. The more we focus on the money, the worse it's going to be when that money just goes away.
Yeah. I'm thinking of physicians out there that are practicing and are stuck in a way that we have to practice sometimes to make the money that we need to feed our families. Compared to if you had money coming from somewhere else, because you were investing, you can now see people and treat patients the way you want to because you're not so worried about the income coming in. That's more where I was going with that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of having that multiple streams of income, having that money, those investments coming in, and you've worked on it for a very long time. I suspect you would be in the place you are today, even without your inheritances, because at 18, you were doing it. If your dad took it all and gave it to the cat, you knew what to do.
Yeah, well, I can explain a little bit about how it happened that way. But yeah, I understand a lot about the doctors, because becoming a doctor, you also, for people, it comes with a lot of debt. So to get out of that debt, I went to law school, you went to medical school, like those debts are large, and you don't get the big salary in medical for like many, many years after residency. So it's a very long scale to get there. And I understand that. But it's one of those things where I can say, like, hey, if you just focus on the patients first, like it will come. But like I really know in medicine, like it does not work like that. So it is part of like understanding, well, okay, I'm getting in this, do this. Let me start early, knowing, like what you found out by mistake by saying like, hey, we're going to buy this building together. And like, wait, we're real estate investors now.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot more doctors now, just from my clients and other people I know, that are looking alternatively to supplement later because the income's good and they want to start using some of it along the way. But what I was going to say about, when I was 16, my dad put a decent amount of money into a Merrill Lynch account and said, you're going to invest in stocks. Here you're going to talk, you're the broker at the time. So if you want to make a trade, you have to talk to him. But I got really good at stocks, and I don't know how. This is pre-internet. I was just really trying to learn stuff. I would read in the newspaper. I would literally look at it like a box score every day. And I think my dad being open about money and open enough for me to like, hey, if you lose the money, it's okay, taught me that a lot about money. And, again, I didn't have to have a scarcity mindset, but I also wasn't put in the position of being forced to have that scarcity mindset that a lot of people have, because that comes from their parents who rightfully did have a scarcity mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea that your dad put the money there, said, this is yours. This is what you're going to do with it. You've got to talk to the guy to understand it. More of us, even if it's a little bit of money, even if it's, we don't have a lot to give to our kids, but to get them on the right financial road, even if it's just to know how to talk to somebody financially, that's amazing to me. That's really, really good.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like with real estate, that's one of the things that's so important. My dad did that. I probably owned, 30, 40 properties before I was 18 in my name, just putting parts of corporations with my sister and I. But my dad, on those weekends, we would go to yard sales, we would play sports, we would look at dump foreclosures, and we would always go to collect rent at the properties that he owned, and he would bring me with him. So I would watch him collect the rent and understand. He would explain, like, we own this. This is owned by a company called CompuServe. This is why we own this. It's in trust for you and your sister. So even though I was like, can I just get a video game the whole time? It was sinking in, so that at 18 or 20, I was 20 when I bought the first house, like on my own with no assistance from him at all. Like I knew so much, and I knew what not to do. So I have very few like real estate losses in my career, and the only really two were just because of 2008 and I picked the wrong time. But the properties were great.
Yeah. So what I've heard from you is time and a mentor. Your mentor happened to be your dad, and you, over a lot of time, learned, and not even trying to learn. Your dad was just we're going to do this.
Relentless.
Not even been paying attention, but that stuff is sinking in as you're watching, thinking, why am I here? Can I be off doing what all my friends are doing? And this is where you are. Okay. Let's go back to where you are today. What are you doing? Besides, you build teams, you help agents become better agents. You're a life coach. You've been an attorney.
Some days I feel like it's a lot. I mean, my main business really now is the on-market real estate team, and I'm still in production. So I do the large amount of business on my team as an agent, but I also run real estate meetups through the same brand as my podcast. So we run meetups for real estate investors, and I kind of do what I would call now free coaching for a lot of investors and friends, which will morph into other things. But with the scale of real estate investing, it's like everyone's become an expert. Like kids who are half my age who don't know anything are suddenly like an expert in real estate investing on social media. So I'm trying my best to create, value add things for people without asking for a big ask. And I know, when I do have something that costs something, I want people to know that I've put in, years giving away stuff for free to create this. I do still invest, but because of the way that the market cycle has gone, we sold off a bunch of our old properties during the pandemic smartly at the right time. And now I just have that money waiting to deploy. I consider myself an asset hunter, so I don't deploy money on bad deals. I'm very good at not buying bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm patient. I have like no need to go buy something. So now it's me just watching the market, learning from, having people like you on my podcast. And that's what I like about podcasting. You talk to other people, you get new ideas every time,
Yeah.
and then you put them into a memory bank to deploy when you're ready or when the right opportunity comes across. And you're like, wait, okay, now the pieces are coming together. So I'm really in that stage now. I used to flip maybe one or two houses at a time, and now the deals where I am in New Jersey just aren't good. So I'm on hold for now.
Okay. So how do you decide that the asset is the asset that you're going to buy?
Yeah, great question. It's not like everybody else, I can tell you that. Most real estate investors these days are being taught via spreadsheets and over calculation and looking at properties online and then putting the figures in. I do none of that. On commercial buildings, obviously, I'll put in numbers into a spreadsheet. But what I'm looking for as an asset hunter is actually all things that you can see, smell, hear, touch, feel, and research, not in terms of actual. I'm more interested in, migration trends, population, things like that, or things that maybe people don't think about, things that happen at the county board level, where development's coming, where's Whole Foods moving, where's Starbucks moving, Trader Joe's. Those things I think are much for real
Mm-hmm.
estate investors,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're basing your research on what giant companies who can spend hundreds of millions of dollars are doing, you're going to put your bets forward, and then I don't have to do that work.
Right.
So if someone would tell me where all the new Starbucks are going, I would just buy places around them. It's a no-brainer. It would work every single time. I mean, barring like probably it really would, at
Yeah.
least in the short term. So,
Yeah.
assets to me, I always say see, smell, because like you have to know what 200,000 feels like in your market or where you want to buy. And for everybody who's looking virtually and trying to like understand, like I just put out a video today, like you haven't seen the basement. And all the sunk costs on properties are all in basements or where the mechanicals are or in structural or in mold or other things like that. And these virtual investors are just not knowing that. You can have a picture of the basement. That doesn't mean that you can smell it and see the structural, anomalies of walking on the first floor and seeing like, wow, that slopes a lot. If I put a
Yeah.
marble on one side, it's going to roll to the other. No one's going to tell you that. So I get weary for brand new out of state unless you really have good boots on the ground and understand. So to me, like assets is really like a learned thing. I don't think it's easy to go right out and do it, but I think people are spending way too much time online and not enough time in the field looking at houses. So even if you want to invest, say you live in Los Angeles and you want to invest in San Antonio, just still look at houses in Los Angeles, because you have to understand what houses feel like, where the problems are, so that when you do see a picture of something, you'll be like, "Ooh, wait, no, that's mold. That's mold. That's going to be an issue for my mortgage." And I think that's what a lot of people are missing because they want to scale too quickly because social media tells you, hey, you can be a
Yeah.
millionaire in 1 year if you just become a wholesaler right now.
Yeah. So you talk about you live in Los Angeles and you want to buy in San Antonio, but you don't have anybody. How do you decide what markets you're going to go to that aren't where you are?
Yeah, great question. I know we talked about this a little with you as well. So the way that I tell people to do it is to make two lists. The first list is a list of every place you've ever lived, gone to school, any place that you've spent more than a couple months. You put that on one side. Then you make a second list of every place that your best friends and family, the ones that you would trust, not like Aunt, Jackie, who is known to just want money. Like, no, not Aunt Jackie. But you look at the second list and say, where does everybody currently live? And then what you do is then you start to do your research on where markets that you might be interested in are. There will always be a crossover. And then when you see the crossover, those are the markets that you start to do a deep dive in. Why? Because you have a competitive advantage. You either know more about the area or you have someone who's not going to let you down by going to tell you, how does it smell in the basement? It smells bad.
Yeah.
Okay, what kind of smell? So that always works. And then again, like if you don't know anybody, you're just working off of person to person relationships to say like, hey, I have a funnel, in Indianapolis. This is who I use. I'm still leery of those myself, but there is a secondary way where investors are very, very good to each other. But you have to spend a lot
Takes
of
some
time
time.
building those relationships to make
It does
sure that
take
it's
some time.
okay.
Yep, definitely. Those connections are important, but I don't know if I'd go buying in San Antonio
Yeah,
if it's just somebody you just met last week and they said they've been buying in San Antonio. You understand what they've been buying.
exactly.
It becomes a very interesting thing. I remember I bought one of my properties sight unseen, and as I was about to close, I sent my sister. It's like, go make sure there's a building there for real.
I mean, I was investing pre-internet, as a kid. I was going around with my dad in like in the 70s looking at properties. So it was a whole different game then. I mean, when I started buying properties on my own at 18 and 20, like there was no MLS on the internet. I didn't
Mm,
have dial-up even then. So it was like, you get the booklet. And I remember, because I'm very like focused. And I remember my realtor, we'd pull up at a place when I was buying my first place, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. And she's like, what do you mean? Don't you want to see the inside? I'm like, I don't like the outside. Why would I go on the inside if I don't want to come home to something that I'm never going to like the outside of? I don't need to see it. And this was like, I wish, I was probably a terrible client. I complain about clients now. I was probably the worst, but I still think that's right. I've had
yes.
clients now say like, I don't like it. I don't like the feel of this block. And I have to say like, yeah, you're not going to want to come home to that.
Let's keep going. Let's keep
Next.
going. I'm buying a house. I know I heard you say on one of your interviews that you've done the best in the properties that you bought yourself and lived in,
Yeah.
and bought a house in a town that's a very unusual house. Unusual for the town. It's like doesn't feel like that town. It feels like a house that would be in the mountains or by the ocean. Should be an ocean view, but you know, I just really it feels right. And yeah, I
Yeah.
remember you saying you walk into a place and it feels right to you, and that's if everything else pencils out and works out, then move on it.
Yeah, and I think I learned with the last flip that I did, and I wouldn't say like, I know probably higher end flips compared to most. Like my buy-ins usually in the 500 range, and we spend a little less than 200, but we make about 200 on those. And those costs have gone up, but that's kind of the best scale for
Mhm.
flipping here right now. But the last house that I flipped was like a mid-century modern ranch, which was like not common for the area. But what I found is like that's my wheelhouse, because the reason why is I can get a better deal on that because one, this one happened to need a septic, so we knew that that was going to be a cost that first-time home buyers weren't going to buy. But also, this isn't the type of house that like developers and like major flippers who are doing multiple projects want, because it's different.
Too
They have
much.
to like figure it out. They just want to do your standard colonial or standard add a level so they know what they're doing and they can replicate a formula. And I'm like an anti-formula. So I agree. Now my focus for flipping is buy the house that doesn't look like any other houses in the neighborhood, and then do that. Because yes, when you go to sell, you'll have less buyers, but you'll have more motivated buyers
Mhm,
because there's
mhm.
not another house that looks like that in the neighborhood around the corner.
Exactly, exactly. So you said you work with physicians. How do you work with physicians in what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, happenstance happened a lot. A lot of them found me on Bigger Pockets, and then through the networks, I've just talked to them. But like one of my good friends, it's so funny. Shout out to Naveen, because I hurt my back like bad, had to be boarded, go to the emergency room hospital. I was in there, and this doctor had come in. The attending from the emergency room, or the attending when I was in, talked to me. 3 or 4 years later, I got a message on Bigger Pockets, and he's like, "Hey, can we set up a Zoom?" And I pull up the Zoom and I'm like, dude, I know you. And so he's not only him and his family have become a good friend, but he's also my doctor now. But we've worked on him. We bought 2 multifamilies together. We're always looking at third. I'm working with his dad, who he has a medical practice with. His brother has a medical practice. And then through that, I've just met other doctors, and I've met, first-time homebuyer doctors who are going to use the doctor loan portal, which is great. But I think as investors, there's a lot of doctors now who want to see if either themselves, it's usually going to be their spouse, can get that, real estate investor 750 hours and get the credits there. And I think that's a plan for a lot of them. But I think
I'm gonna
once you
have you.
get,
I'm gonna have you stop because I know a lot of people listening don't know what that is. So
yeah, there's a qualified status as a real estate investor where you have to have 750 hours in the business. And then it relates to many, many tax credits, which I can't, relay because I'm not an accountant. It's a very good thing to have. It's not easy to get. You do have to document it, but I've specifically seen it with doctors because at the point, like we said, you're doing well and you're in private practice and you have the money to expend. Like that's another option depending on what the spouse does. Like they're both doctors in that family, so they're both doing well and both on the same page. And I just think, I look at a lot of the professions like that. I mean, I was a lawyer. I work for the government, so I wasn't making a ton of money, but lawyers and doctors and professionals like that, dentists, like once you get to the point where it's going well, you have to figure out what to do with the money, and a lot of us, me included, end up, money stuck in index funds, and then they like make you feel bad when you take it out. And I'm like, why do I have so much money in index funds when I know everything about real estate?
Yes.
So it's been like a financial journey has been interesting for me and just understanding finance.
That's why I think a lot of physicians, attorneys, those professionals put money into their 401k, their retirement plan, and that's their plan. They have one plan. I'm going to work until this time and hope. And I don't even know if people even think about the fact that they need to hope that money is going to be there because the stock market does what the stock market does.
That's because that's what financial professionals tell us to do.
Exactly.
And I've had very good financial professionals, but I can tell you, all of them tell me not to invest in real estate. And I'm like, do you know who I am? Like, this is what I do. Like, why are you? So I keep saying, like, right now, I don't need to do it because like, there's nothing to buy, but I want to take all my money out, put all my money in real estate. And they're like, well, you're not going to be diversified enough. I'm like, I can be diversified in real estate. I can have like short-term rentals, long-term rentals, do some midterm. I can flip. I can buy apartment buildings. I can invest in syndications, which at this age has become much more interesting to me because I know more operators. So I know like I can say like, hey, I'm good. Like take 100,000, like, and I can I don't really need to look at the data that much. I just trust the operator.
Yes. And you can diversify it across the country, around the world.
Exactly.
Kind of things like
different states. That's diversification, and like you said, you can invest. When we were on my pack, you can invest in an area where you can have an enormous amount of social impact. And then you can do one that's just like a flip. You just want to do well for money. And that's what I think is so interesting about real estate. I've always said it's an asset class that can be fully diversified. Like stocks, I understand you can get into, gas, electric, startups and stuff, but it's all in the air. Like you have no control of it. Real estate, you can value add anything and you can get appreciation. Stocks, it's not appreciation, it's random. If the CEO has a scandal, the stock goes down. No one's having a scandal on your twoplex in Topeka, Kansas. It's just a twoplex,
Well, okay, maybe they will. I have a friend who bought a thing in San Antonio. Bought a thing in San Antonio, saw his property on the news with helicopters flying over it but he was able to come back from that. It wasn't like the thing was over because he had control. He could come in, do the things he needed to do, value add, ultimately sold it for a lot of money. So it can happen. I mean, yes, you can have icky things happen, but you still
it's still tangible asset. And the worst case scenario, it burns down, you have the land. So like my sister and I, when we, took over, after my dad passed away, we always said like, it's cool that we have all these access. What if like the world goes crazy? And then of course, like all this weird stuff started happening as we were growing up, getting older. And you're like, we still have these assets. So like if for some reason, so when I got divorced a long time ago, almost 20 years ago, I was about to flip a house and it gave me the opportunity to just move into it. And again, it's something that we talked about, like people who are in situations where they feel like, well, I don't have anywhere to go, having extra properties that are rental. Sure, you can't just kick the renters out, but it gives you opportunities over time. Yeah. We always bought short-term rentals because we wanted to go there. And then we were like, wait, we can make more money. And this is like 20 years ago. We're like, we're not like tied to it. So why don't we just rent it out? So we were doing like Verbo and HomeAway long time ago.
You did those just on your own? Were those platforms there then?
Yeah, Verbo and HomeAway were like pretty new, but those are the ones that we used. And this is going back like probably 15 years minimum, maybe even more. And we did it, my sister, we would just do it with some of her houses, and we had other properties that we would just do it. And we would switch off. Sometimes we would do long-term rentals depending on how it seemed. And then if the market was good for short-term, we would just do short-term. And we bought a lot of places. Like if my sister's best friend lived in an area, we would buy a place near there so they could help. And that worked for us a lot because they had their job and they had their kids, but like we knew like we trust them. They're not going to let us down because we both have a specific personality. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
so
If
that
something goes
worked.
bad, you at least have somebody there that can get there urgently to take care of something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes to the two lists that we talked about before. That second list is where do your friends live? Because you'll read all the articles and you'll see like, oh, top 10 investment things. And you go through them and then you're like, whoa, wait a second. Charleston, West Virginia or something. I would never thought of that, but my friend lives there. So it's like, now you have an advantage. So why are we trying to create something from scratch, which takes more time and adds to more analysis paralysis? Because how are you going to, you have to build a funnel. You have to understand the market. You're staying up all night looking on Google. Like, people who do virtual wholesaling, they're like, well, I'm driving the neighborhood on Google. I'm like, that could be like 2 weeks old. That could have, burned down.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a little bit ago that you were doing some passive investing because you met operators. How did you meet those operators? How did you decide to trust them? You said you don't even look at the numbers. I'm sure you look at it to some degree.
Yeah.
You're not like poring over it and reading the PPM word for word and those kinds of things because you trust that operator. How do you build that trust with those folks?
I mean, I'm really embarking on that journey now. I never really knew much about syndications like growing up because my dad didn't do that. And then obviously like through my time, I would be like, oh, that sounds interesting. But then I was, a little ego, like I can do it. Why would I need somebody else? And then I was like, I'm busy. Is there a better way to make money and like invest in larger scale? I read Brian Burke's book, which was great. And then again, it was my podcast that's really opened up syndications to me. I would have a guest on, they talk about syndications in a non-salesy way. And I'm like, I would invest with them right after the podcast. I'm going to send an email like, hey, and again, deals have been a little bit scarce recently. There's not a ton out there. So, this is probably, over the next 6 months, my plan is to just invest, not little, but solid amounts in about 3 syndications and see how I feel about that. With like a 3-year out cycle is fine with me, with opportunity before. But like you're saying, I mean, for me, trust is earned, and I want to be why I like podcasts is that you can hear that like you and I can have a conversation like this is real time. They're listening to a recording, but like it's not like edited,
Right.
like
Yes.
we know what we're talking about. And you can find out on podcasts if people know what they're talking about, especially when you're hosting and you're talking directly. Like, I know that person's not gonna, do something, and I know that they understand the game. And then I go do my research on the website, ask some questions, but I wouldn't call myself growing up as like overly trustworthy. I'm certainly not gullible. I'd say I don't trust most people, but when it comes to investors, the more that you build your sphere, the more you understand, like, I mean, I'll take it. That's an educated risk. Every deal is a risk, but if I'm going to take a risk, I'll like do it with that guy or that woman or that person. Like, Brian Burke's book, The Hands-Off Investor, like when you get through the concepts, it's you're investing in the operator. The deal is secondary because if you don't understand the operator, how do you even know what's going on? Does the operator have money in the deal? That's my first requirement is how much of your own money is in the deal. If they've got 500 grand in the deal and I'm putting in 100 grand, like I'm good, as long as I understand the payout structure.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. That's one thing. Cause I know a lot of people are afraid to like, I'm going to give my money to this person who's running this deal. I don't know them. They don't ever think about the fact that they put their money in a suitcase and hand it to their 401k people, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. But also with social impact investing, I think like it gives you the opportunity to invest in towns and bigger projects, that it's a $6 million project. Like you're not going to do that. But if you put in 50 grand or 100 grand, now you're part of, change and you can adjust because towns need it. We're in a housing shortage. Affordable housing is very difficult, which we talked about, and now it's like, how can you do both? There's ways to uplift a community without like overly gentrifying everything. I hope so, because, we watch those markets and you're like, well, where's everybody supposed to go if this area gentrifies?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. And right now I'm into making sure people have ability to get to good, healthy food. So
I love it.
I'm thinking of railroad cars. What do you call those things? Making those into grocery stores.
Oh, yeah.
Can't even think of it. Jonathan, how do people get in touch with you?
Social media is great because I don't answer my phone on purpose because it rings all day. I don't know how anybody gets my number that way. It's out there. So on Instagram, it's Trust Green with an E at the end. And that's like across most social media platforms. I put out a lot of YouTube content as well. My real estate team is called Streamlined Properties on Market. We're brokered by eXp Realty. We operate in New Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania, parts of Nevada. And I have my broker's license in New York as well. And that's at Streamlined with a D properties. And then my podcast, which you have been on, Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And I loved our conversation. And it's just like real estate is fun. I think that podcasts really open up an opportunity for younger people, older people, people who never thought they would be investors to be like, this actually could work. And it's not that scary if you just take the time, and learn who else has done it before you.
Who else has done it, and get somebody to walk beside you when those first few gets it really stuck in. You talked about a book, The Hands-Off Investor. Say that one more time.
Yeah, it's The Hands-Off Investor by Brian Burke. It's all about syndications. It's really like, to me, the best book on syndications, and one that for me, and I've had Brian on my podcast. He's a great guy and he's very straightforward, and I think if you want to learn about investing, you need to have focused on people who are straightforward and aren't going to like sugarcoat anything for you.
Yeah.
Like, if the deal's bad, I want someone to say the deal's bad. And that's what I do for people. They don't like it in the beginning because they think it's a deal of the century, but I don't want to go down on the ship with them. So I'm going to tell them the truth. If they decide to stick with it, it's outside of my hands.
That's, of course. I mean, you give counsel, this is what I think. And, you do what you do. I appreciate it. It's like, and I promise not to say I told you so.
Yeah.
I might think it. I won't say
I might.
it.
I honestly might. It depends who it is. But yeah, I like a healthy I told you so as a just like, hey, this time maybe let's not go down that rabbit hole, because the thing is you have to look like, does the person giving you advice have any stake in the outcome? And if the answer is no, or they're not trying to steal the deal, then why would they be telling you something false, especially if they have, as much experience as I do? And I think a lot of my friends and investors that are in my groups know that now, that like, I don't want to make a bad decision. And I actually will not put a bad decision on my record. I say no to a lot of deals. I withdraw representation. I won't make lowball offers for my clients. It's not for me. It's not the way that I do business. And as long as they can operate in those parameters, I love to work with them. But again, I'm not going to like sacrifice my reputation in real estate just because somebody wants to do something their own way.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Great.
That doesn't make any sense at all. Jonathan, thank you so much. I've had fun here, just like I had fun when I was on your podcast. It's really good to talk to you again.
Yeah, you too, Felicia. And I look forward to staying in touch. I appreciate Money with Mission and learning all that I did about you on my podcast, and glad to be a part of yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You guys, all his information, contact information, that book will all be in the show notes because I know you're sitting down with the paper, writing all this down. So until we see you next time, talk to you later. Bye.
You've been listening to Money with Mission. There are projects happening right now where you can have a great financial return while positively affecting the lives of others. To learn more about our opportunities, go to moneywithmission.com.